There was one day where I checked the date. It was not April Fool's, but I had like candidates in a row that all had placed an AI avatar in front of me. A number of nurses and doctors on staff and have shown it to them. And the feedback that I've gotten so far was I really wanted to hold the AI's hand. Just mind blowing to me. And that's super interesting for administrators because if I can have that measurement for one person, I can have that measurement for everybody on my staff. And now I have a measurement for empathy in my senior care facility or hospital or whatever. And that almost immediately translates into quality of care.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, the podcast where we learn to build AI businesses by interviewing product leaders and innovators in AI. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and today I'm joined by Nicolas Tobis, who goes by Nico. Nico is the Vice President of Data and AI at Relias, a digital education and training solutions provider for the healthcare and social services sector. There, he leads the team transforming a business worth hundreds of millions of dollars into an AI-first business. Nico, could you tell us about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I work for a company called Relias, which is a healthcare education technology company that is now also expanding more and more into general workforce management. And Relias is part of a division within Bertelsmann called the Bertelsmann Education Group. And so the education group was founded at this point a bit over 10 years ago with the idea to invest into online learning companies. And then through different opportunities that opened up, it ended up that most of our investments were in the edtech space in healthcare specifically. And so that's where our investment into Relias kind of came in. Yeah. And then the Bertelsmann Education Group in turn belongs to this larger German conglomerate, which is Bertelsmann, which owns brands like Penguin Random House, which is the biggest book publisher in the world, BMG, which is the fourth largest music records company after Universal, Sony, and so on. And so there are a few brands in there that, people might know. People often don't know is that it's all ultimately owned by a German conglomerate, which happens to be privately owned. So that's another thing about Germany, that there's a lot of stuff in the private sector. Yeah. And so for myself, I'm the VP for data and AI. And so what that means is I manage a team of data scientists, data engineers, data architects, and cloud infrastructure and BI developers. And so what we do is really four things. We build internal analytics. So that is anything that people within our company want to know about the business. We build dashboards for them so that they have access to that information. We build external analytics. So that is dashboards and insights for our customers, which they can access through our SaaS application that we sell. And then we do internal AI. So I just alluded a little bit to the internal productivity tools around content development that we're building. And then external AI. That's all customer facing features that we build, like AI assistants, recommendation systems, and that kind of stuff that we're putting into our SaaS application, which is ultimately a learning management system.
That's a lot. And I do recognize some of those brands as well, but like you said, I had no idea that they were just owned by a single company at the highest level. That's a pretty big place to be part of.
Yeah, and it's exciting because it's, for me, I sit in different sorts of boards in the company where I then get to, one of my favorite ones is it's called the Tech and Data Advisory Board. And so you have different representatives from all these different companies that I just mentioned in that board. And the VP of AI at Penguin Random House might have a very similar problem to one that we're facing. And so just exchanging ideas on that level is super helpful. And although the company is very diverse in terms of the subsidiaries that exist, you have a really good knowledge sharing on sort of shared problems. And that's one of the, I think, benefits of this structure.
I wouldn't have expected that you would interact with those people or that each different company would have a VP of data and AI. That's super cool. And there's a question that I think is on everyone's mind. with a podcast like this, which is, Nico, are you an AI?
Not yet. I do get that question sometimes in our company, actually. I still think people are joking, but it's gotten more frequent, so I'm not sure anymore.
And what do you think makes them ask?
I think it's less about me and just about the fact that AI can do so many more things these days. I was speaking with another colleague, and for their company, they were investigating all sorts of simulation technology, which is actually also something that we're working on. I can share a little bit about that in a second. Yeah, he had created an AI avatar of himself. I mean, there are a few companies out there that do that really well, like HeyGen, Synthesia, and so on. And he had joked that he and his wife have like a safe word now. These things are getting so good, so you don't really know who you're talking to.
Yeah. And using them for job interviews, I've heard people do. So
I've
it's,
had that actually. So I've had
oh, no way.
and there was one day where I checked the date. It was not April Fools, but I had like candidates in a row that all had placed an AI avatar in front of me. And it was telling because the responses were not casual. They were like as if somebody had written them out before. And one person, was more on they were on camera, so they didn't use a video avatar. And so with that person you could just see the eyes go left to right as they were like waiting for the response to be generated, I guess. That's something that's happening right now.
Wow. That doesn't sound like a good thing.
No, because when you get the job, you're likely not qualified for it. So I don't understand it from the side of the job seeker either. But yeah, it's something for I think hiring managers also
Mm.
to be aware of. But yeah, I think what's cool to discuss. So I just mentioned the simulation technology, and I think it could have like a profound impact on how um, it changes how we consume education, at least in specific instances. So in the healthcare space, when you as a doctor or you as a nurse have to go to a patient or a family member or something like that, and you have to convey like a difficult message. Let's say that the treatment has not worked or something like that. Then often especially when you're young and you're new in the field, it's the first time that you're sort of having that interaction because nobody practices that stuff with you. And so we've kind of taken that idea and we've built a prototype that we're showing to customers now where a nurse or doctor can select a given scenario and then can have a voice interaction with an AI to practice specifically that conversation. And like I said, we have a number of nurses and doctors on staff and have shown it to them. And the feedback that I've gotten so far from one of them was, I really wanted to hold the AI's hand. Just mind blowing to me. Uh,
Yeah.
and so yeah, we're showing this now because then sort of where you can go from there, if you're the supervisor of that person, is you can click a button where you then have a second AI that evaluates the conversation that you've just had. And so you can get feedback for improvement and measurement on how you performed in that conversation. And that's super interesting for administrators because if I can have that measurement for one person, I can have that measurement for everybody on my staff. And now I have a measurement for empathy in my senior care facility or hospital or whatever. And that almost immediately translates into quality of care. So I think, if you ask me about where AI in education is going or what sort of significant impact it's going to have, I think that is one area that I personally find super exciting.
Yeah. I think that's a theme I keep hearing too from different people is the ability of AI to help empathy is way stronger than I thought it was going to be even a year ago. And is that something that simulation of hard scenarios, is that something that ever existed before, or this is just something that people are like, wow, we didn't know we needed this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So we have stuff like that. We have educational content that is meant to teach this. The way we do it today, though, is we hire actors and we film a scene basically where you see a patient reacting to a message that you're giving them, or maybe like a high stress situation where someone is also freaking out and they're sort of getting a little bit too much in your face as the caregiver. And what happens then is it's sort of choose your own adventure. The video will pause every once in a while and it'll ask you a question like, what will you do in this situation, A, B, or C? And then you click on something, and then the video continues in the direction of whatever that you just picked. And so that's worked reasonably well. There are just two challenges with this approach. The first one is it's very expensive to produce because you have to create not one video that's 10 minutes long, but you have to create many snippets that ultimately add up to 10 minutes that can be reconfigured in a number of different ways. And also, if you're the learner, so the nurse or the doctor, and you found the correct solution path at some point, then now you've completed the game, so to say, right? No more paths for you to take. And that's where AI kind of takes this to the next level where you have it's probabilistic. So you sort of have endless possibilities of where the conversation can go. And so there it becomes more of an engineering challenge to see how do you make it so that the conversation ultimately like converges to a goal, because you're still in an educational course. You're not in the free world basically where
Yeah.
it can go anywhere.
No one's trying to make this AI write Python code or something.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's also true. That would be weird in that scenario. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. That reminds me of the other example you had of the content production company that
Hmm.
just can do more than it ever could before. And it feels too like with this use case, you're able to react to it in a much more natural way rather than pausing and answering questions. Now, this feels like a niche in content generation. And I know you mentioned before that there's quite a few things that are exciting that you're doing. Would you just give me an overview of I think you said there's internal and external AI.
Right.
And what are the most exciting things in that category for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. On the external AI side, we had just mentioned the simulation piece, which I think is, I mean, very interesting because it changes how you deliver education. The other thing that we always think about, because ultimately we're a SaaS company that through their SaaS products provides education and other functionality for our users, we have to think about how do people in the future want to interact with SaaS systems. And so that's where right now you see everyone talking about, oh, it's, the year of the agent.
I follow several people who are predicting that SaaS is dead, and I'd love to hear what you think because it just seems so far fetched.
Well, so that's the thing. Yeah. Dead, I think, when you say that, you're likely to get a lot of clicks, which may be desired in those instances. Personally, I think, you'll see sort of an evolution. What we've noticed is that our platform, as we've sort of added functionality, is becoming more complicated. It's becoming a more complex system, and our end user may not want to have to deal with the different pieces of functionality that we offer. They just want the tool to get the job done. And so that's where we're currently exploring the idea of what I would call sort of a natural language user interface. Um, so that the common way to, operate a SaaS platform is you have your mouse and you can click around in the tool, and then the user interface will call certain backend APIs that then perform an operation for you. What if it's not your mouse that triggers these actions, but rather you issue voice commands or type into an interface, and the underlying agent or agentic system understands which agents it needs to trigger to perform those actions on the user's behalf. This may sound like an easy way out of, deploying a clunky and a difficult system. But I think they can sort of coexist. I think you should still strive to have a nice user interface by itself. But for the more complex workflows or, different people prefer to interact with systems in a different way, you offer essentially just like another avenue to execute tasks. Similar to like in learning. Some people like learning by reading, others by listening. And so we're all different. And so if I can make the usage of our platform easier, for the hospital administrators so they can spend more time on the floor with patients, then I've achieved my goal. And so that's, I think another exciting topic on the, let's say, external AI component.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that one
Yeah.
more. I'm sure there's more topics to talk about too, but that one in particular, I've also heard this concept of essentially AI agents replacing APIs. And I think you just link that concept with even the SaaS interface for a human. What has been your involvement with designing that? What have you seen so far, how it has evolved and replaced interfaces?
So replacing APIs, I don't know, that still feels a little bit abstract to me because ultimately there's some sort of operation that needs to be performed against a database or something. And I think the easier sort of middle step that we're going to see is agents interacting with the APIs so that then the API can perform, or the underlying logic that the API represents can perform that operation. I do think there's value in being careful in how you design your APIs themselves so that they become easier to use and interact with for agents. So we're currently undergoing a larger project where we're modernizing our entire backend architecture of our SaaS application. And so the underlying microservices that we're building out, we're making sure that those APIs are built in a way that we can also leverage this, new agentic system that we're building, and they connect easily. But we still need the, let's say, regular backend APIs because they still need to connect to the normal user interface that people are used to. Yeah, so that's kind of our approach in that
Mm.
area.
So it sounds like both systems exist at the same time and you're not doing away with one or the other. So then is it as a user, I would go somewhere different? Is it embedded in the SaaS application or how does it look?
So I think until we know for a fact that the users prefer one avenue over another, for us these things are going to coexist. So one very common use case for us is to say, I want to create a group of users in my hospital, let's say all nurses that have a specific nursing specialty, let's say emergency room care, and all of the nurses that are in the Fresno, California facility, that is my group that I want to create. And then I want to assign learning to that group of nurses. Um, I can do that through our regular user interface. So I can go to the user group builder. I can select all the necessary filters, and then I can do the same with the learning plan that I'm assembling, and then I match the two up. And so all in all, that's probably somewhere around 20 to 30 clicks or so. Or I can type exactly what I just said into a natural language interface, like a chat, that either hovers in the bottom right corner of the screen, or you go into the full screen mode that we would also enable. And then the agent essentially understands the request, rephrases it back to the user to ensure that it's about to complete the correct operation, because you want to make sure that's what they do and not anything else. And once the user confirms, then these 30 clicks that we just talked about, they've all been abstracted away into this relatively seamless interaction. And so I think there's a world for both, because some people just like to see what they're doing, and that's how they interact with the tool, and others will prefer the natural language way of interacting with the system.
That's super cool.
So far we've talked more about things that I think will be revenue generating because they enhance the product. And then you get to the part that we also talked about in the beginning of the conversation, where you say, okay, where can you make processes more efficient? For us, a large number of people and a large amount of hours is obviously spent developing our educational content. And what we're doing right there is building internal tooling that can sort of help accelerate that work by taking away the pieces of work that people are sort of less familiar with. Like we talked about the writing, for example. There, the idea is to build an internal, or what we're working on is like an internal tool that the writers can use that that is adjusted to their workflow. Because otherwise, you could also use tools like ChatGPT and so on, and people. But then people context switch a lot. They copy paste a lot of information, and so we'd prefer that people stay in one tool so that they're hyper focused on their work.
Mm. So you've been involved with building a tool that is helping people stay in flow in a single context with educational content creation.
Mhm. Exactly.
What state is that tool in now, and what do people do with it?
So we've completed a proof of concept that we have had our writers experiment with and provided feedback. And now we're going to a second phase where we're building out all the connectors. So basically, the proof of concept was able to essentially take source documents that the content writer gathered and then combine them with learning objectives and a given audience for the course and a desired length. So you specified certain parameters, and then it would start writing the course and exam questions at the end for you. And so that was well received, but you can add a lot more to that. So what Perplexity does really well is it covers the research part. It searches the internet, it provides references, and then provides an output for you. So that is very similar to a part of the workflow of a content developer, where they go to websites of like medical journals and so on, and gather that content, and then ultimately remix that into a course and provide references to the original source material. And so that research step is another thing that we're sort of including now in this product, for example.
Hmm. I'm someone who likes to write, and I personally find it kind of cumbersome to make AI sound anywhere close to what I like it to.
Mhm.
But you said it was well received. So did you get any comments around that?
So what we're doing there is our company over the years has built thousands of courses. And that's where the devil is a little bit in the detail here. You want to make sure that your new content doesn't sound substantially different from what our customers have, learned to love over the last couple of years. And so right now, what we think is enough in this first phase is to essentially selectively augment the prompts that we use for large language models with our source content and then essentially reference the style and so on. But we are also experimenting with fine tuning LLMs, especially the open source ones, to see if there's a lift in performance for specific types of content. But that is sort of, more, let's say, in the experimental phase. What we know works is essentially augmenting your prompt with previously created course material to capture the voice.
Very cool. This one of the things I wonder is like how do you start from scratch essentially? And it sounds like this isn't starting from scratch. This is building into a process that Relias has done for a long time, and so you can augment it.
You definitely can, but I think starting from scratch is an interesting problem to solve, because when you start from scratch, the mountain almost sounds insurmountable because you feel like you're so far away from your goal. And if I put on, let's say, the engineering mindset, then what I would always do with, let's say, the objective is I need to create an internal software tool that can create e-learning content. The first thing you need to do is break it down into its components, and say, what is the smallest component that I can build to demonstrate value? And so that could be, I want to create a mini tool that can write the intro paragraph of the course transcript. So right now we're not talking about any visual content. We're not talking about the entire course. We're talking about a mini component or just the outline of the course, for example. And so once you have that, you iterate on that, you get the next tool, the next component, and so on. And so you gradually build out and improve your software rather than trying to do everything at once right in the beginning.
Is this a tool that increases the amount of output or decreases the amount of input for the same output? or for something else entirely?
I think similar to the example I mentioned in the beginning, I think it will do both. We will be able to do more, especially when it comes to derivatives, for example. So we create course content and then we have derivatives such as micro learnings. So little things that we can send to you every once in a while to refresh your knowledge. In order to do that, I need either an increase in staff, because right now the staff is somewhat focused on that, but mostly focused on generating the larger courses. Or I add that to my tool stack, and now AI is very good at remixing and summarizing existing content. And so if I can create a lot more of this derivative content, like these micro learnings, then I can also make sure that my learners, so doctors and nurses, consume this content more frequently, which then hopefully improves their ability to do their job. And there's a clear sort of benefit here of adding AI to the picture and increasing the output rather than just creating efficiencies.
Yeah, and I like that too because it's not even the same output. It's output that maybe in the best case you would have made but didn't have time for.
Exactly right. And so that's where we're pushing the team to think through exactly where they would like to be able to do more. Another really good example is we have to sort of constantly monitor the regulatory environment because our content, the healthcare space is very tightly regulated. And so you want to make sure that your educational content reflects whatever the most recent regulations are. And so monitoring that also takes a certain amount of people, and their hours are finite. So they can monitor this maybe once a year. So maybe you miss something for a few months because you didn't have the manpower to monitor a certain regulatory change. With AI, I can obviously process different state governmental websites significantly faster and understand whatever updates there are. And so that's another example where I think, can do more with AI that will then lead to a better product than, let's say, just, creating efficiency.
Yeah. Well, I have a big question for you as well, which is what's one belief about AI that has changed since starting to work with it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think if I reframe the question a little bit, I think what has surprised me is how quickly it's become so ubiquitous. And what I mean by that is my mom is in her early 60s and is a Pilates instructor. So she's the farthest away from AI as you could be in terms of expertise. But she has recently discovered that to plan her Pilates lessons, ChatGPT is a really good sparring partner. She figured that out by herself. Nobody had to set it up for her. It was just that simple. And so I think it's surprising to me how quickly it's become sort of so pervasive in a lot of people's lives. And I think it's only going to sort of accelerate from this point on.
Yeah, I agree. That is surprising. It's just everywhere and it's not hard to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've really enjoyed our chat, Nico, and there's a lot more that could be said. But just for our last couple of minutes, is there anything you'd like to share that you haven't shared or about what you're currently doing now and how people could follow you?
I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton of things right now. I think I've spoken about the different projects that I'm particularly passionate about. And yeah, to follow me, you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'm always excited to connect with people that are in the same space and just want to exchange ideas.
I started this podcast because I wanted to stand at the gate of businesses using AI and see what separated hype from lasting impact. Back when cities had walls, you had to go into the city to do business at the market. So, if you wanted to talk to someone, you waited by the gate until they came in or came out. Do that enough times and you could talk to everyone. That's what I want to do. Stand at the gate of people doing business with AI and talk to them, see what they do and why they do it. If you know someone that's making an impact in the world of AI, would you connect them with me? You can find me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at daniel@manary.house. That's Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.